On today's show, is Sacha Boisvert worth a top 20 pick in the 2024 NHL Draft? We'll discuss that and a lot more in today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High. We're both scouts at Dauber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the game of Sacha Boisvert, a highly ranked prospect available for the 2024 NHL Draft. We'll start off with the profile, the puck skills, so, stick handling, shooting, passing, skating, all that stuff. And then we'll get into the more intricate stuff in our second segment, talk about the toolkit, the habits, the decision-making, all that good stuff. And then we'll end things off with our projection of Sacha Boisvert, his upside, and which team would be the best fit. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with the profile for Sacha Boisvert. Talk me through the size, handness, where he's been playing this year, where he's ranked, all that good stuff to get us started here, Sebastian.
Yeah, so Sacha Boisvert is a 6'2", 179-pound left shot centerman playing for the Muskegon Lumberjacks in the USHL, where he has put up 36 goals and 67 points through 60 games, logging 86 penalty minutes in that span. And he is ranked primarily in the 17 to 23 range for the 2024 NHL Draft. A couple outliers there, including our own ranking at Dauber Prospects, where we had him at 30th overall, but we're about to record our midterm rankings, and he's going to receive a little bump in that ranking to really fall more in line with the consensus ranking for him, because this is a highly intelligent and really diverse offensive player, and especially with the puck on his stick as a shooting threat, but also a playmaker. He is really, really dangerous and also very composed under pressure. So there's a lot to like with this player, but let's get started with the puck skills first and foremost, and the shooting has to be the big standout here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's a 7 on our grade scale. It's not just the power, the velocity, and the accuracy. It's the versatility with Boisvert. You see a lot of prospects, especially out of the junior leagues, whether that's the CHL, the USHL, or the MHL, that have one shot and spam it to all hell. And that is definitely not the case with Boisvert. He can score off the wrist or off the snapper. He can curl and drag. He can one time. He can backhand. He's good in tight. He's good from mid range. He's good from long range. Like, he has every shot in the toolbox. I don't think there's anything really missing from his goal scoring arsenal. He's just not the most, he's not as accurate and powerful as, for example, Cole Eiserman or Justin Poirier, but the versatility is what makes it work. And the brain also is what makes it work. And we'll get into that a bit more in detail in the second segment, where we break down the toolkits, the habits, the decision-making, all that stuff. But for me, with Boisvert, the shot is the definite standout tool. But that's no knock on his playmaking either. His playmaking is really good as well. Talk me through that and what you like from his playmaking, because I've watched him a decent amount, and that's a big standout for me as well. But I want you to read on that as someone who's watched him recently as well.
For sure. I really like his selection of plays that he makes with the puck on his stick. He implements a lot of delays on puck, waits for lanes to open up for him, whether they be shooting lanes or passing lanes. And when he has both of those lanes open, he will try to deceive defenders in one direction in order to exploit the other. And there's that duality in the offensive toolkit that makes both the goal scoring and the playmaking all the more dangerous. And he puts a lot of pucks towards the slot. He's a very accurate passer down low. well in the high danger areas. You rarely see him like missing on passes that are really going for that high danger chance. And he's always at his best with the puck on his stick in high danger areas, whether it be as a shooter or passer. It's where he elevates his game the most. And that's something that you always look for with those high skill offensive players. Like, you want them to be at their best in the highest danger areas, and Boisvert is certainly that.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of handling skill, I think that goes along with the skating, because as soon as he gets going at top speeds, it breaks down pretty quickly, stick handling wise, in my viewings. But from a standstill, where he's going from like a stop and go situation, where he's receiving a puck at the half wall in the power play, a player's closing in on him with a lot of speed, he's really good at kind of accessing his backhand, protecting the puck, and kind of driving around a player. Like, that's not a bad part of his game. But I do think that the handling is definitely the lower end of the trifecta of puck skills. For me, it's at best a 5. Like, there are games where it's a 3. It depends on the circumstances and how fast paced the game is. Because as soon as you raise the pace on him, his stick handling skill can break down pretty quickly. But what he's really good at doing is protecting pucks inside of his skating stride. So driving the net, dropping the shoulder, protecting the puck with his leg and his arm, and just kind of driving around players towards the net is a decent element of his game. But it needs to come with improved skating ability, because the skating is also an issue, right? Like, where would you rank his skating? What grade would you give that?
Like 3.5 or 4. It's quite weak. I think that there's also like a lack of a really high motor here. So like the shoddy stride mechanics are not exactly uplifted by a super high stride rate or intensity.
Yeah.
Like it may be with other players in this draft class. So in terms of like overall moving around the ice, I'd give him a 3.5, but he's super efficient with the routes he selects, and he's very deliberate with it. He's quite aware that his skating is not the strongest part of his toolkit, and he uses his other tools to try to make up that ground, whether it be his intelligence in selecting the routes or using his physicality to protect possession on puck. He's also, as you mentioned, with the handling, when it's at lower speeds, he's very intelligent with a single small evasive maneuver or a single little puck touch to protect possession. It's very effective at those lower paces, but when it's at higher paces and you can't exactly outthink opponents in handling situations, and you actually have to rely on those mechanics, it kind of breaks down a little bit more. But yeah, like the overall movement around the ice, especially with the puck on his stick, could certainly use some work. But again, the intelligence is something that makes up a ton of ground there, and I think makes him a lot more projectable than he'd otherwise be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a lot of what he does well has to do with reads, and again, we'll get into that more in detail in a second. But just to break down the stick handling and where the strengths lie, it's really in the reads he has of his opponents. He's really good at understanding what move to pull off based on the speed of the opponent closing down on him, which is really, it's an adaptive habit, if you will. And we'll expand on that in the next segment. But in terms of adaptive habits, I don't think there's a better player at circumventing his problems than Sacha Boisvert in this draft. It's really interesting to see him go about it. But yeah, in terms of the interactions between his tools, we'll delve into that in the next segment as well. For right now, in terms of just to recap, the skating, the puck skills, the skating, the handling, the shot, and the passing are the 4 that we mentioned today in this first segment. The shot is, for me, the distance, by decent margin, the best element of those 4. Would you say the passing is next? Would that make sense?
Oh yeah, a long
and
shot.
What grade would you give it?
I would say if the goal scoring is like around a 7, I'd give the playmaking at least a 6. I think it's quite significantly above average. I think that there's a lot of room to grow there as well. I could see him progressing at the NHL level, being a true dual threat, being just as comfortable a playmaker as he is a goal scorer. But yeah, the handling and the skating are certainly a couple tiers below those 2 other tools.
For sure. And we'll expand on how he circumvents those issues more in detail. We'll talk about the toolkit, the habits, and the decision making in just a second. Just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. But on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. I know I personally am always a really big fan of single game parlays just to add a little bit of spice to the action, especially when I'm attending a game live. It makes it so exciting when you just have a couple bets on the line at a game in person. What are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about the more intricate details in Boisvert's game. So first of all, the toolkit, how his tools interact within each other and uplift each other. We'll also talk about the habits and the decision making, which are also strong elements of his game. Just before, I think we can give the general offensive sense a grade, just to give people an idea of kind of where we stand on that. For me, it's better than the shot. It's a 7.5 for me in the viewings that I've
Very
had.
strong.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Absolutely
Sure.
perfect. So let's get into the details of that. So first and foremost, the toolkit. So how his tools interact. Obviously, we discussed how the skating and stick handling interact negatively. As soon as he gets to top speeds, the stick handling kind of breaks down. I think it has to do with the lack of disconnect between his upper body and lower body, where when he's skating at full stride, his shoulders are bobbing up and down, his head is bobbing up and down. That makes it really difficult to handle pucks in a scenario where your body's not in control, it's not stable. You watch, for example, a William Nylander or a Connor McDavid, some of the best skaters in the NHL. Their head is at the same height the entire time they're skating. They can be skating at their top speed. Their head doesn't move up or down; it stays flat, which makes it really easy to control pucks in that scenario. So it has to do with edge work. It has to do with mechanics. I feel like you can work with that, especially if he gets in a top end NHL program that has access to some of the best skating coaches in the world. You can work on that. We've seen the likes of Barb Underhill and some of these other skating coaches work wonders with prospects in the past. So I wouldn't put it past Sacha Boisvert to get past this issue, but we'll see how that goes on. But in terms of the habits, I think that Boisvert has some of the most interesting compensatory habits in this draft, right?
For sure. I think especially offensively, like he is very active on offensive retrievals. Like a little bit like a player like Tarek Parasak, who we covered last week, despite a real lack of like skating proficiency, he is really, really intelligent with how he applies his tools on retrievals. He is very powerful. He can gain a decent head of steam at full speed. And when he attacks into the corners, he really uses his physicality to outmuscle opponents, gain possession, gain inner body position. And when he establishes that, it's very difficult to take the puck off of him. So he's really effective on those retrievals and just immediately then contributes to the cycle, but is also a threat to take the puck himself to like a perimeter area and be a scoring threat from there with his wicked release or even the playmaking threat. And because he's so versatile with those tools, he's very difficult to predict, especially against junior competition. So he's really diverse in his habits offensively, but really reliable and refined in those facets. I think like in the defensive zone, it's a lot more inconsistent, especially in terms of how much energy he plugs in the defensive zone, but especially offensively, the habits are just like a real strength.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the defensive lackings, I don't think come from a source of not understanding these things. It comes from a source of lack of energy. You know, he has to. When you have skating that's that inefficient, it means you're burning energy. You're burning a lot more energy in your stride than other prospects, which means that you need to conserve your energies for the right moments. And I think that that's a bit of the issue, where Boisvert knows what's going on, and as most as he can, he'll glide to the right spots. He'll anticipate play fairly well defensively, but that's the issue: is he's gliding still. He's not rushing to these spots. So that means that sometimes he'll get to the lanes late. Sometimes he'll, kind of stay at the top of the offensive zone, or kind of head into the bottom end of the defensive zone to help his defenseman early, just to make sure that he doesn't have to rush there to offer support. All these things can have kind of certain effects. But another aspect of the habits that you kind of alluded to a bit in the first segment is the route selection in the offensive zone. This is a player who knows he doesn't have the foot speed to outrace players. So he's anticipating play in advance. He's positioning himself proactively and using the right routes to gains soft ice really well. That's what's made him so effective down low, around the hash marks, or just in the low slot overall. I mean, this is a player who consistently gets to spots early, establishes body positioning, and then kind of parks himself there, or just sneaks into routes, sneaks into pockets of space with just the right timing in order to create plays. But to close things off, in terms of the decision making, I feel like there's a lot to talk about here. We can spend a decent amount on the ability to decide on the right plays, whether that's on the puck or off the puck. But let's start with the shooting. How do you like his decision making and how it interacts with a shot?
I'm a very big fan of it. I think especially because he has really grown out his playmaking game over the course of the season. He is always aware that it is just as viable an option for himself as a shot. So he's not a player that's going to just spam shot from wherever he has the puck in the offensive zone. But when he has a little bit of space to get a shot off and a marginally clear shooting lane, he will take the opportunity. He really likes to unleash his shot because he knows how dangerous it is. But he's also patient enough to integrate a lot of composure and patience into his shooting game, right? Like he's going to wait for a shooting lane to really open itself up rather than just rifling off a shot as soon as the puck is on his stick. So there's a definite level of intelligence and composure in his on-puck game, and especially in how that interacts with the shooting. And yeah, again, like because the playmaking has taken those significant steps over the course of the season, he's really learning to integrate that and really be very deceptive in his on-puck game in like especially like the high and mid slot, whether he's going to go for a backdoor pass or rifle a shot from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that decision making, that hockey sense, also interacts with his playmaking ability, and that's what really makes him such an effective distributor of the puck as well. I mean, this is a player who I don't think I've seen make a wrong pass. Like if he makes a pass and it misses, it was still the right pass to try. So I think the accuracy is one thing, but for me, the decision making is so consistent regarding which passes he chooses, into which areas he plays them, what type of pass he chooses as well, whether it's a slip pass or a hook pass or a saucer pass. He has a great arsenal of passes and he pulls them off. He chooses the right pass for the right moments, which is one of the most important things that I look for when I'm breaking down a player's hockey sense through tape. It's, does he have the versatility to try different passes, but also does he choose the right passes for the right moment? And it's fairly consistent with Boisvert, especially on the power play from the half wall. He's really good at either kind of slipping a puck down low if a player's kind of checking him hard, but he's also really good at finding cross ice options when players back off of him. So it's just there's so much to love about his passing ability. But I also think his decision making, as we alluded to as well in the first segment, interacts with his stick handling in interesting ways, especially from a standstill, right?
For sure. No, it totally does. Like I think that like the handling is certainly mainly founded in the intelligence, and it's one of the main reasons that it falls apart so clearly at higher speeds when you can't just outthink opponents with the handling. And he's at his best as a handler when he keeps his touches to like limited like 1, 2, or 3. As soon as he's trying to make really complex maneuvers, it starts to break apart, and he becomes a lot less in control of the pace of play. But in order to solve simple problems with like individual forecheckers, he can really use his handling to like create enough space, then create a play, whether it be a pass or a shot. But it's not exactly a tool that is going to create a ton of space for himself or his teammates.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's another big part of his defensive game, like his decision making when it comes to getting involved along the boards or kind of protecting the slot or putting his stick in the right lanes, even though the effort level isn't there. And again, that's probably due to the inefficiencies in his skating and how much he has to kind of pick and choose his moments to put in the energy levels that he has. I think that when he's choosing on plays, when he's deciding on where to intervene defensively, it's pretty solid. And I also like the fact that he's not the type of, he's a big body who likes to drive around players, but that's not all he does. He's not a Josh Anderson spam the drop the shoulder button and drive the net type of player. He's really comfortable cutting back when he needs to, understanding that, okay, this defenseman has a step on me and is a better skater than me. So let me cut back and find a pass. He's really versatile in his ability to create off the rush, which is very interesting for a player with lower end skating. You usually see that from players with better skating who are a lot better at those cutbacks, a lot better at those net drives, because they have that fluid skating, that effortless skating that gets them around the ice fairly comfortably. But with Boisvert, you still see those habits. And in his case, I think it's actually a product of being a bad skater, which is again a kind of recurrent theme in this segment. A lot of what he does is a byproduct of being a poorer skater and having to adapt, having to find ways, and adaptability is key in the NHL. I think that's one of the things that makes me so confident in the projection with Boisvert, and we'll get into that in just a second. But before, a quick word from our sponsors at Sleeper.
The NHL season is almost over, with the playoffs now just over the horizon, but there's still time for you to get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our number one choice here at the Locked On NHL Podcast Network for all of your daily fantasy hockey needs. And that's because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And all you need to do to win is to correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. And you can get really creative with those if you so choose. Whether you want to take your swings on the stars of the league like Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, and Cale Makar, or maybe you want to stay a little bit more in line with the theme of this podcast and take your swings on the NHL's young studs, whether it be Adam Fantilli or Connor Bedard. The choice is yours with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details on locational availability.
Alrighty, so closing things off with our final segment here, we'll be talking about the projection, the upside, and which team would be the best fit for Sacha Boisvert. And I think we can start with a projection here, because for me, it's a fairly safe projection. I don't see much of a scenario where Sacha Boisvert doesn't make the NHL in some capacity. His goal scoring touch is too good. His intelligence is too good for that not to be able to work at some level. It's just a matter of whether you're talking about a second liner, a third liner, or a fourth liner, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I think that like the intelligence specifically and that adaptability that we're talking about in the last segment are going to be really key in making him be able to create advantages in whatever role he ends up settling in. And of course, there's like significant upside here as a second line scorer and a dual threat one at that, with potential first power play upside as well. But yeah, like he can always adapt to more limited roles offensively, and because he has that ability as a decent forechecker and an intelligent forechecker more than anything, you could always play him in a bottom six checking role, and he's going to add some depth scoring on top of that. Now, whether or not he's going to hit his upside remains to be seen, but this is a swing that I think I and many NHL teams would be very comfortable taking in that 20 range of the 2024 NHL draft, because he does have that combination of being able to create advantages, even if he ends up missing out on his upside that is carried and uplifted by his high level of skill and offensive intelligence, with all those other benefits that he can bring to the ice. So he's a player that I think will be valuable no matter where he settles in the lineup. And yeah, like the upside is also quite intriguing, and there's not that much to dislike in this player. Like there's certainly some consistency woes, especially defensively. Like we alluded to that earlier in the episode with the overall involvement, and also like why that level of engagement is impacted by how strenuous skating is for this player. But overall, this is a player that's a fairly comfortable NHL projection, and again, has some really intriguing top six upside at that.
Absolutely. I also do want to talk about the projection of where he ends up, because that's a bit all over the place right now. But realistically, where do you think teams will start to consider him seriously? Not in terms of where we rank him, but where do you think teams stand on him? And, when does he start to become a legitimate option? At which point in the first round?
I would say around 20. I think 20 would be kind of the baseline where I could start seeing teams be really interested in him. Like he brings so much that any team's value to a high degree, whether it be the goal scoring talent, the versatility offensively, the forechecking ability, the power game. He's very strong as well for his age. And skating is something that we've seen quite regularly over the past years being worked on significantly after players are drafted. And that will certainly be necessary for Boisvert. Like the skating needs work. And in order to unlock that top six upside, it's going to need to take a couple steps. steps. But I think that
Yeah,
NHL teams are going to be quite confident in being able to progress it enough for him to be able to leverage his variety of strengths against pro competition. But yeah, I expect him to go anywhere in that 20 to 30 range on draft day.
for sure. I would expect a team, maybe even kind of a bubble contender. Like I think he could go as high as 15 potentially in this draft. Maybe even a team at 12 or 13 that's really bullish on him could end up going with him. But realistically, we're probably talking about a 15 to 25 player at the end of the day. And speaking of which teams do you think end up in this glut of teams that is in this range would end up taking a swing on him? Like I'm looking at the Vegas Golden Knights, the New York Islanders as potential options for him. Those are two teams that I feel like could go for a player like Boisvert, especially the Islanders. He really screams
Yeah.
Lou Lamoriello to me, but uh, you know, where do you see him? Well, first and foremost, which teams do you see improving his skill set the most after draft?
The Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, would be really up there. I mean, obviously, there's the Barb Underhill connection, which would help a ton, but he also brings a lot to the table that the Leafs have just really, really valued in the past decade. And whether that be like the secondary scoring element, being able to read really elite players, being able to read the offensive game at a super high pace, and find really, really like high end, being able to solve problems at a very high end level offensively. And yeah, I think he'd be able to complement the stars in Toronto really nicely. And on top of that, he brings the power element as well as the combined goal scoring and playmaking threat. So if they're able to get his skating up to like an average level in the NHL, oh boy, watch out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think Colorado can do some good work with him. If he does slip as far as that, I think that he'd be a great fit in Colorado, and they could do some great work with him. He's just such a good complementary player. I don't think that you could make him into a play driver if your team's a bit poor, you're a bit low on top end talent. But for me, I see him so clearly as a complementary player to a bona fide first line playmaking kind of dynamic uh, dynamic force on the first line or a second line, for example. But yeah, I also think that the Nashville Predators will have their look at Sacha Boisvert and kind of evaluate where they stand on him because if he does end up as kind of a top line upside type of player, which is very very fringe, I see him more as a second liner, but it's possible. I think they could take a long look at him and see where they stand on that. But yeah, regarding the upside, do you see Sacha Boisvert as worth a top 20 pick, or is this a player that you would start considering at 20?
Yeah, like I think 20 would be a personal baseline for me where I'd be really starting to look at him. I think it has less to do with him and more just that I think there's a massive glut of players between like 5 and like 17 that I think are really intriguing and have like real significant top line or top pairing upside. And with Boisvert,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think it's most likely going to be a second line, or maybe if you find the perfect complementary fit on a top line, that could work. But in all likelihood, it would be a second line ceiling. But that said, I wouldn't be arguing against selecting him in that 15 to 20 range either. I like him a lot. I have a ton of respect for his offensive versatility and the intelligence. And again, I think that this is a player that I think that has like real significant upside, but as a goal scorer and a playmaker, like in the right situation, he could be a 30 goal, 30 assist player in the NHL. But a lot would still have to like develop over the next couple of years for that to occur, especially in terms of the skating and the handling ability. But it's so helpful that he already has such a strong baseline of offensive decision making, composure, and obviously the offensive tools as well.
Absolutely. And that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you thought of the episode, what you think of Sacha Boisvert, and what you want us to talk about next. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review. It helps the channel out a lot. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of April. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.